Hyperdrive Hockey is brought to you by the Game Over Network. Make sure to follow us on YouTube at Game Over Network and catch Hyperdrive Hockey in audio format on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any other good streaming platform. Hello, beautiful citizens of Planet Hockey. Welcome to another episode of Hyperdrive Hockey on the Game Over Network. Please, if you are listening to these words, consider subscribing to our YouTube channel, Game Over Network, and catch Hyperdrive Hockey in audio format on your preferred streaming platform. Hit a subscribe button, hit a notification button, and most importantly, leave a comment, leave a like. Daphne Malbeuf, how are you doing today?
Pretty good, Max, and I wanted to wish you a happy birthday. It's a birthday boy yesterday, though. But
exactly. The day prior to the day we are recording this podcast. The age of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. I was scared yesterday. I was scared that somebody was going to come and want to crucify me for something I say on the numerous platform. I was like, no, please, please, please don't. And everything went well. It's good. It's good.
Yeah, or you don't need a Christ for that. You just need some haters.
Well, in the very wise word of one of the greatest singer of our generation, Taylor Swift, the hater's gonna hate, hate, hate. And I'm just gonna shake, shake, shake. I shake it off. I shake it off. Kevin Nagame, how are you doing today?
Doing pretty good. I'm shaking it off also. And, I missed Taylor in Toronto. I wasn't able to go. And, it'll be a grief that I'll have to live for the rest of my life.
I don't think I would have been able to afford those tickets.
That's true. Yeah, no, that's true. Well, luckily enough, maybe if you get like one or two tickets and then you resell them for like $10,000, but
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's too much money to go.
Ticket prices these days for a concert. Yeah, I mean, I could do a show-long rant on this. For in the weeks headed to my birthday, my girlfriend was asking me because Linkin Park is coming to Montreal a year from now. My Chemical Romance is doing a Black Parade specific show in Toronto a year from now. She was like, "Would any of these interest you?" And I was like, "It's gonna be a $500 gift. So thank you, but no. I've seen those bands. I love those bands." She got me the Black Parade on vinyl instead. You know what? Less expensive. I can put it in my apartment, enjoy, and she's going to hear me singing way too loudly. Poor her. She doesn't know what she got herself into. You know what are affordable tickets, though?
What?
The PWHL is starting its sophomore season this weekend. I am so happy to see the PWHL back. It's starting on Saturday, November 30th. Here in Montreal. It's going to be the charge against the Victoire at Place Belle. I'm very excited for the second season. I am excited to go get some Victoire merch here. Please consider doing the same in your local city, or even if you don't have yet a team in your city. Merch is one of the best way to support even when you can't go to a game. It spreads the love. And I'm very, very happy for the start of the second season. And I'm excited also. I'm excited for the novelties. I'm excited to see how the teams have improved. I'm excited for new players. And I'm excited for what will conclude in a Montreal championship.
Ooh. Are you betting on this one now?
I would not, because I am a man who needs to be way more informed than I currently am to make a bet. And I have to be honest with you. Now, I'm being all fanboy here, but I'm excited to hear you on this because Montreal last year, I mean, of course, the biggest strength, they have the GOAT. They have Marie-Philippe Poulin, who I think she's 33, turning 34 in the spring. She's still pretty much in her prime, despite nearing her mid-30s. She still was one of the best players last year. She didn't get the MVP title. She missed 3 games. The 3 games that she missed, Montreal lost. They were top-heavy. Montreal was a top-heavy team last year. It was showcased more than ever in the playoffs against Boston, where MPP, Laura Stacey, Erin Ambrosi on defense were all overutilized. I think Ambrosi had over an hour in triple OT of ice time. So they're a top-heavy team. I'm curious to see if it's going to be the same thing this year. I hope they have more depth.
Yeah, and that was the big question for Montreal. But first and foremost, Max, I feel like there's a lot to be excited about for this
Oh
second
yeah.
season because the players know what to expect, right? I feel like last year there was, an adaptation process. If only in terms of the game that was way more physical than the players were used to. And so it got to a point where some of the players got off to a bit of a rocky start. And what's interesting, it's not only Montreal got some depth, but every team has been able to improve for the second season with the second draft and all the girls coming from Europe. But if
Yeah.
we're looking at Montreal, first of all, their defeat against Boston last year, I feel, will serve as motivation. And we could see in camp, they got for the first preseason game against each other. And they really hate each other. There's a rivalry there that's been going on ever since this playoff run. And talking about what we added to the team, I'm looking at, the first line was last year Marie-Philippe Poulin, Laura Stacey, and Kristen O'Neill. And if we're looking at what they did in the playoff, it was like the only line that was utilized. And it got to a point that, they didn't have enough gas because they didn't have enough depth in the roster. But now you add a girl like Lena Youngblom, a 23-year-old Swedish player who was picked up the last pick, 15th round in the first draft of the PW,
Okay.
but she couldn't play because she had already a contract
Contract in Europe.
in Europe. So she wasn't able to play last year, but now she's coming and she could turn out to be, the hidden card from Montreal because she will fill the gap in the offensive depth. She's a very skilled player. She's a power forward. She has also high hockey IQ. She's just really smart to find open ice. She has grit. She's a girl who's not afraid to go for pucks. So she'll be able to feed Poulin and Stacey, which she would complete on the first line. And it would, just allow Kristen O'Neill to just go on the second line. And if we're looking at some addition also in the offensive, it's Alexandra Labelle, who was last year in New York. She played a more defensive role on the fourth line, but what we saw from her in the camp and in preseason's game, she showed some really interesting offensive skills, and it could balance, the lineup. I feel like she could fit on the third or on the fourth line, so it would be interesting to see where she is put it, but we will have more offensive skills, that is for sure. And also, you said it, but Erin Ambrose was too much. Also, like we gotta
She was
take some pressure.
overutilized.
Yeah, we gotta take some pressure off her shoulder, and the defensive core also improve. We had the addition of Kayla Barnes. She's injured now, but she will be back soon. She just come through college, but she has a lot of experience on international scene, and she'll be able to, help get the offense going again. And I feel that what's needed also on the defensive side. So yeah, it could be really interesting. But I feel also like the character of this team, and I've seen it. I've went to the camp and to go see a preseason game, and I was just like, this team is, like it has already have like a chemistry. So I feel like it could be also a really good thing for them to just like, a lot of them like know each other and they've played with each other last year. And you just add some nice elements, some nice piece here and there. So yeah, I'm curious, but I'm excited to see what's going to look like for Montreal this season.
And I'm not surprised to hear what you said at the end about chemistry because MPP is known on Team Canada. Of course, she's captain, but she's known to be that glue that, stick the player together, bringing them for fun activities and bringing the gals from all over the country under one big banner, under one big team. One of the biggest story that we will have to watch in this new season is, of course, Sarah Fillier in New York. With the Sirens, she was awaited. She was amazing again in her last season at Princeton University. She is making her long-awaited debut. She is already a core member of Team Canada. She's a gold medalist in the Olympics. She's a three-time world champion in the World Championship. And she will bring some excitement to the game. And of course, New York had that pick because they finished last in the first season of the PWHL. They finished last, but first of all, it's a 6-team league. But it was a tight season last year. I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, but the distance between the first team and the last team wasn't that dramatic. So I could see New York, led with Sarah Fillier, be much better already this year.
Yeah, she could be like a difference maker. She'll have an immediate impact for people who have saw her on the national team. Like, what she can do. She's kind of a generational talent. So we know she can do magic. But if we're looking at New York's last season and looking at what went bad, because they had a good start. And I feel like it's because of the team didn't just live up to the expectations. And some of the players there underperformed. When you're looking at a girl like Elisabeth Giguère, which, she's known for her offensive skill, but was really limited in her points. It's because she wasn't utilized to her fully, to her full potential. So in New York, we opted for a makeover. We're off to a fresh start with a new coach, Greg Fargo, who's replacing Howie Draper. He spent the past 11 seasons coaching the women's team in Colgate University. So he has plenty of experience in the women's hockey. And we need to see those players stepping up also. This is what's going to take. Like, Sarah Fillier is going to, do her magic, but she cannot take all of the pressure on her shoulder, especially not in her first year, because I've said it, it's the PWHL, it's different. Like, just with the physical, the way the game's much more physical, like she would need time to adapt. So other players in the team needs to step up. And when we're looking at what went bad also last year in New York, I feel it was because they couldn't defend. So Greg Fargo will be able to take all the full potential of all the girls and maybe have a new strategy to make them perform better. But they had a good start last year, so I'm eager to see what they'll be able to do. Also, if we're looking at what they had in their draft class, it brought the Swedish blue liner Maja Nyland Persson and the Finnish forward Nora Toulouse. So these are really good additions also for New York.
Talk to me about the other team that missed the playoffs last year, the team that is now known as the Ottawa Charge. I could be wrong on this, but when I look at the roster, I feel like Ottawa might be the team that doesn't have at least like one or two, like at least big name that you instantly recognize. Of course, you know who Hilary Knight is, Marie-Philippe Poulin, Sarah Nurse. Even if you're not the biggest follower of women's hockey, you know those names. I always felt like Ottawa might be more a team that needs to have a team concept. First of all, am I wrong? And two, is it still the same thing this season for Ottawa? And what do they need to do to, like New York, try and get into the playoffs this year?
It's interesting because if you're looking at, you've said it, there was plenty of parity in the standings last year. They needed to clinch a playoff spot. They needed one win in their last 3 games, and they couldn't get it done. So the problem with the Ottawa Charge was that they weren't able to close game properly. if you're looking at the stats, they had the lead and they were tied late in the game in 54% of their losses. And so you look at this and you're like, okay, you need to manage better. And maybe it came from, a poor defensive structure, but they missed a playoff. They had a lot of time to think about it. They had plenty of time to get it right and find the balance, between improving that defensive play, but still being able to maintain the offensive pace that they had last season. And you're talking about big names. There are big names coming to the roster, and maybe they find a solution in defense with the Finnish player, Ronja Savolainen. She's a 5'10" girl. She's a tough player. She knows how to get it done. She can defend the crease. She's really like unapologetic, and she's really physical. And she's played, in Sweden, where they are able to play physical since I feel like 2021, or 2022. So, like she knows how to play physical. She will
not be surprised by the physical game of the PWHL.
Absolutely. And she does it well, like without being, getting penalties out of it. And beyond being physical, she really can create offense because she's big, but she's also like, she has a big shot. So that would be interesting to see her. And I feel like if we're talking about big names, Danielle Serdachny, they brought her from the draft, second overall pick this year. She was the scorer of the golden goal in the overtime in the last World Championship. She helped the Canada, beat the USA in that thrilling final that went overtime. And so she's a big piece that would be added to the roster. But one of the questions also last year was the problem in front of the net. Amherst Maschmeyer, we had high hopes in her, but she was unable to find her rhythm. Sandra Abstrider also didn't do much better. And so now they drafted the goaltender, Gwyneth Phillips, who's intended to be the backup to Maschmeyer. She was the goalie of the year in the NCAA with Northeastern in 2023. And they've also signed another Canadian goalkeeper, Logan Angers. So that could maybe help, closing game when you have someone strong in front of the net. That could be something that would help the Ottawa Charge for this season, hoping that they will make the playoff this time around.
Talk to me about the Toronto Scepters now. Scepters, sorry.
It's also, yeah.
You know what?
It's always tricky.
The Montreal Victoire had a little bit of criticism for going for a full-on French name that will be tough to pronounce for Anglos. I'm going to tell you a thing. As a Franco, Scepters, well, it's not that bad, but it's that C there is always like, it's a bit tough for me, like, to pronounce it, but maybe I just suck. That is also a possibility. We were talking about offensive firepower. We were talking about stardom. Probably one of the team, if not the team, that had the most stardom and firepower last year, of course, was Toronto. The two best scorers in the league, Natalie Spooner, Sarah Nurse. Natalie Spooner is injured. She unfortunately had an ACL injury back in June, but Sarah Nurse is there, of course. It's interesting because Montreal and Toronto finished 1-2. Toronto and Montreal, actually, Toronto 1, Montreal 2 in the regular season standing last year. Of course, Montreal and Toronto sports media, we got excited. We were already getting ahead of ourselves, imagining a beautiful Toronto-Montreal final for the very first season of the PWHL. And, they both didn't do the job in the playoffs. Both got beaten. Montreal by Boston, Toronto by Minnesota. Despite the loss of Natalie Spooner, is Toronto still the team to watch to start the season? Them who did not win the cup, but finished first in the regular season last year.
Yeah, I feel like they still got the elements, but you were talking about how Montreal didn't do maybe not as good without Marie-Philippe Poulin. If we're looking at the injury of Natalie Spooner, Max, when she got injured in the playoffs last year, the team collapsed totally. They lost the 3 games in a row following this injury, and they finally lost to Minnesota in the first round of the playoffs, which was not planned because they were far ahead and in this series, and Minnesota finished last
Fourth.
for the playoffs. So in the fourth position. So if you're looking at it, you're like, oh, how much time does Natalie gonna take off? Because if she's missing some time, and we don't know how much time she would miss, maybe that's a little scary. She scored the third of Toronto's goals last year, which was 20 goals. And if you're looking at the stats, Spooner and Nurse were accounting for over 45% of Toronto's scoring in the first season. So who's going to step up? That's my big question. And I see players like Blair they have players that can do so, but they need to start looking at how they can address this concern, because it is a concern. But if you're looking at the additions that they did, they have Daryl Watts, who's an offensive creator. She's fast. You have Izzy Daniel, who was Patty Kazmaier winner from Cornell University. She's not too flashy, but she finds ways to score goals. So they did a good job in the offseason to, address their scoring depth concerns. They got finesse, they got grit. So I feel that they got everything to, have a good season all over again. But I'm curious, really curious to see how they will do without Spooner. They need to find a way to, get the team around without her, which is sad because she's also a good leader. Like we've seen on the national team. Like she's really a great leader. So I'm curious to see how they will do without her.
One of the most intriguing team for me is the Boston Fleet. Why? Because on paper last year, I was looking at the Boston Fleet and I thought maybe this was going to be one, if not the best team in the PWHL. And the regular season was a grind. The regular season was a grind for the Boston Fleet. They almost missed the playoffs. You were talking about the Ottawa chart. Well, Ottawa, who collapsed. Boston sneaked into the playoff, just like Minnesota. It was a battle for between three teams for one spot. For two spots, actually, technically. Both Boston and Minnesota made the playoffs. But they played an amazing series against Montreal. Then they went on and also played a good series against Minnesota in the finals, lost that series. Aaron Frankel, between the pipes, the MVP of that playoff run for the Boston Fleet. But I still look at that team on paper and think that this can be a team that can contend this season. Am I wrong?
No, I feel that they look to revenge their loss in this second season, and they're equipped to do so. You've said it. They have Hilary Knight. They have Aaron Frankel. They have everything in place, but the question is, how those players are going to do. Because last year, Hilary Knight, maybe more was expected from her offensively. She had just 11 points in 24 games. So she's expected to return healthy and in scoring form, but how good she can perform. And I feel like both, the growth also of the player like Alina Mueller, who was good last year, but can she, perform also this year? Can she grow a little further in her game? I feel that this will determine how good this team would be. Of course, you have Aaron Frankel, between the pipes. So it would keep them competitive all season long. That's for sure. They've selected also a good forward in Hannah Bilka. She did transfer her last season of University of College in Ohio State. She had 22 goals, 48 points in 39 games, and she helped the Buckeyes win the national championship. So she had the experience to go far and, to put maybe a little bit of her team on her shoulder. She also was with the national USA team. So she has experience there, and I feel like also they brought the Czech defender Daniela Pešová, and I feel that this also would be really good addition to them. She helps, the Czechia program claim back-to-back bronze medals in the women's worlds in 2022 and 2023. So yeah, I feel that this would be the good addition, but I still have a lot of I still have a lot of points that I'm not so sure about, but they have all the elements. I mean, how bad can it be?
Minnesota, now the Minnesota Frost, the very first champions of the PWHL, despite finishing third in regular season, tied with Boston at 35 points, a even goal differentials last season, 54 goals for, 54 goals against in the regular season, went on a run, won the very first PWHL championship. They will now have Target on their back as the very first champion. I am curious to see, was it just a good run? Can they be better this year in regular season? Also, they're probably the team that had the most things shaken up in between the seasons this year.
Yeah, and not on the ice. It was off the ice. Everything was everything was chaotic, and just few days after their conquest, also just before the draft, the general manager Natalie Dorwitz suddenly stepped down of her title. They hired since Melissa Caruso to fill the role of the GM, and when they drafted in June, they drafted Britta Curl, a forward who was known for her social media activity, revealing some supporting of transphobic and controversial some kind of viewpoints. So I feel like this all quickly overshadowed their title, and I feel that they have a lot to prove this year. On the ice, however, little has changed. They have key elements that remains in place in Taylor Hazy, who was the playoffs MVP, and Grace Zumwinkle, who was Rookie of the Year. So once again, you're looking at their offense and you're like, oh, they have something that is capable of doing damage. Also, you've said them. They're really good on defense. They did focus on defense in the draft. They take the defender Clara Thompson, who was, who played with the Canadian national team, already had a high-scoring career in Princeton. So this would be good. However, I feel that they need to improve a lot of their special teams. If you're looking at their power play for the first year, it was the second worst at 8.2%, which is outrageous. And also the worst penalty kill by far at 67.2%. Sorry, I'm about to cough.
All right, thank you.
Okay,
Fine.
and then
no problem. So 67% on the PK.
Yeah. So I feel like, if you're looking at this roster, you're like, okay, we need to have continued growth from Zumwinkle and Hazy. Hazy didn't have a really that good of a regular season last year, so I feel that she needs to improve. But yeah, they really need to improve also their special teams, because I feel like it's going to be really, really tightened. Like all the teams had some good elements, had good additions. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, oh, it's going to be tough to get into the playoff, I feel.
It probably will be. As I said, the first season was tight. Montreal and Toronto had a bit of separation at the top of the standing, and then the four other teams were all really tight until the very end. It's all starting on Saturday, November 13th. Boston is at Toronto. Ottawa is in Montreal. Well, in Laval, technically, but let's not get into specifics here. Technically, the Ottawa Senators don't play in Ottawa. And there are many teams like this. So, yeah. And on Sunday, New York is in Minnesota to play on the champion. A sophomore season for the PWHL with team names, colorful jerseys, new players. Also, the last year with 16 already, because we're looking to add 2 teams, ideally for 2025, 2026. So that will be interesting to see how it goes. And you will have learned here first that the Montreal Victoire will claim the victoire of the championship at the end of the season. We will, of course, talk weekly about what is going on in the PWHL in this podcast. And now let's go across planet hockey. There is so much to talk about right now. And of course, we are at the American Thanksgiving, which means we already know who's in the playoffs. Or do we? Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's switch. Let's go. Well, as Mr. Kevin Laramie likes to remind us, at the time of American Thanksgiving, which is way too close to Christmas. Yep, that's my hot take of the day. Salutations to every one of our listeners in the USA. Your Thanksgiving is too close to Christmas. There, I said it. But at American Thanksgiving, on average, every year, 80% of the teams that are in the playoffs at that moment in time will end up in the playoffs. Will it be true again this year? Will it not be true? Which means 80% of 16 teams is a bit less than 5 teams. But if we, put it, you can't have 4 3/4 of a team make the playoffs. So 5 teams could get out and 5 could get in for the playoffs, just so that you are well situated. The team currently in the playoff in the East: Toronto, Florida, Boston, that's in the Atlantic, Carolina, New Jersey, and Washington in the Metropolitan. And the Rangers and Tampa are the wild card teams at the moment we are registering this podcast. In the West, Winnipeg, Minnesota, Dallas are the teams currently in the Central. Vegas, Calgary, and Los Angeles are in the Pacific, and the wildcard teams are Colorado and Vancouver. Which of these teams will make the playoffs? Which won't make the playoffs? Some are pretty much locks already, guys. One of the first surprise for me is that I'm looking at the odds currently on Moneypuck. It's not a surprise for me to see that Carolina Hurricanes, New Jersey Devils, the Winnipeg Jets are all way above 90%, as high as 98.7% chances of making the playoffs for the Carolina Hurricanes. But the Washington Capitals, who I believe they will make the playoff, but standing third in the Metropolitan. No Alex Ovechkin still for a long period of time. They're there sitting at 92.5%, and I do feel like this is a little high. Now, I'm no mathematician, so I will take those odds for what they are on Moneypuck, but the Washington Capitals are a team, as I said, that I think will make the playoff, but they are one of the teams that I'm looking at, not as a lock. And, 92.5% at this moment in time is as close to a lock as you can get.
Yeah. And a lot of people didn't expect them to be in a playoff spot at this point in the season. So it's kind of really surprising. And Max, if you're looking at the standings, team from 9 to 16 are within 5 points for the final wild card spot.
Oh, so it's crazy.
There could be a lot of changes, but I don't know. I feel like kind of this could be also the very same portrait as we will enter the playoffs in April.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's difficult to see which team could surprise us for the rest of the season and be super good. We're looking at Montreal Canadiens and the Pittsburgh Penguins, and you're like, maybe not.
Here's and you know what? I don't want to put Kev on the spot, but I know he's a statsman, so maybe he has a bit of an insight on this. Maybe not too. As I said, I don't want to push you on the spot here, Kevin, but it's because the way I'm looking at this, I see that Carolina, New Jersey, and Washington are all well above 90%. Whereas teams like the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Florida Panthers, who are atop the other Eastern Conference division, the Atlantic, are at 82%, 74.6% in case of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, so is it a case that the mathematicians look at this and think that the Metropolitan is less has lesser depth than the Atlantic, and so those teams are more are higher in those probabilities. But at the same time, I'm looking at Tampa, close to 90%. So maybe it's just they're looking at the calendar ahead, and maybe some of those teams have already faced some of their toughest competition. It's just interesting to me.
It's a little bit of both. If you're looking at the amount of points Carolina has right now, 33 points, that's 5 points more than Toronto Maple Leafs. So regardless of where they finish in their own division, if they finish even fourth, they'll have an easier access to the wild card versus teams in the Atlantic. Team in the Atlantic, top points is 28. So you have 28, 27, 25 for Boston. In the Metropolitan, 33, 32, and 31. That's where the big difference comes. For Washington, the reason why they're so high is their strength of schedule was top loaded. They faced a lot of good teams to start the year, and they're going to have a bit of an easier time down the road. So that's one of the metrics that actually would change those probabilities. But you're looking at teams like Buffalo, which are just outside the wild card right now, 1 point difference, but they do play in the Atlantic, which is a bit more even. The top team of the Atlantic are not necessarily as superior as the top team in the Metropolitan versus the bottom team of the Metropolitan, the Islanders. So you have those type of variants. And if you look at the West, same thing for like Winnipeg and the Central. The two best teams in the league are maybe arguably the top two teams in the Central, with Winnipeg 36 points already and Minnesota 32. Teams above 30 right now have a very high probability of making the playoffs because of the amount of points they've amassed so far.
Beautiful. This is why we brought a smarter man than me on this podcast to talk about those numbers. That was so well explained, concise, clear. I love it. Another space oddity. The Edmonton Oilers, 89.8% chances of making the playoffs despite being out right now. But this is no surprise to me. I think the Edmonton Oilers for the past few years now are betting favorites. They're darlings. And even when they start slow, they end up strong. This is an oddity when you look at the standing. In reality, I agree with this. I agree that I will be more surprised if Edmonton missed the playoff than Colorado. I will be more surprised if the Edmonton Oilers miss the playoffs than the Calgary Flames. You know what? Even the Vegas Golden Knights, who are top of the division, I don't think the Vegas Golden Knights are missing the playoffs. But this is how much I believe in the Edmonton Oilers. Now, maybe this is me being a lunatic, but right here I have Matt to support my claim. I have the math.
He has a math, but yeah, if you're looking at who can hold on maybe to their spots, I feel like the Kings are on the bubble. I feel that Vancouver could be, like chasing their spot, and also could the Flames hold on also to that spot. I feel
it's interesting that you brought Kings and Flames, because I was looking at them, and I was an unbeliever of the Flames. I've told you too on many occasions on this pod, and I was a believer that the Kings would miss the playoffs too because of Drew Doughty's injury. At the start of the season, I ruled them out. They're both in. And right now, I have to be honest with you, because of Dustin Wolf's rise, I would say I believe in the Flames a little bit more than the Kings.
Yeah, I feel that he could be, the special element that can help the Flames make a push. Towards the rest of the season. And also for the Kings, maybe some interrogation there is, like when Doughty is going to be back. Like maybe that could help.
Yeah, maybe he doesn't get back. That's the thing.
Yeah,
we don't know.
We don't know yet. And if we're looking at the East, Max, I'm like, I don't have a good feeling for the Rangers. Just like how
don't.
I have a good feeling, but just like how the team spirit has been in the past week, 2 weeks. I'm like, is this something that could derail the whole season? I don't know. I'm looking at the Bruins, and I'm like, they've looked mostly terrible this season, but they've got talents and they're stars.
They're third in the Atlantic still.
Yeah, but I
would love to be that terrible.
Yeah, and I'm like, they've got talents and their stars haven't performed like they at their full potential yet. So maybe that could help them. If also Jeremy Swayman still backs in a little bit, and they could be maybe the biggest threat for the Buffalo Sabres. And you're looking at the Buffalo Sabres and you're like, oh, they got a chance to be in that spot.
Yeah.
But do they have the character? And I'm just like,
I'm going to start taking the Buffalo Sabres seriously past January 1st. They do this every year. They're there until January 1st, and then they falter.
You're not believing in the Flames. I'm not a believer of the Buffalo Sabres.
Well, I'm not too. I'm not a believer of the Buffalo Sabres. You know what? I'm gonna make a statement for you guys. The 8 teams that are currently in the playoffs in the East will be the 8 team in the playoffs at the end of the season.
Yeah, I have the same feeling.
The only maybe is Buffalo, but mathematically speaking, I have to agree too. I was looking at it. I was trying to make, which teams that are not in will get in. I was trying to get to 5 because we said 5. I can't even get to 3.
For the whole league?
Yeah, for the whole league. Because if we're looking at 80% of 16 teams, it's 13. So there's like 3 teams that are probably maybe not going to make the playoffs, and 3 teams will come in. And I'm like, okay, Edmonton, yeah. And then I'm like, who else? Then I started looking at where they are in their division, because some teams will have a better path for the playoff by finishing top 3 of their division, and some teams will have an easier path by finishing top 2 wild card. So I'm looking, which one is it? And I'm like, Buffalo can finish top 2 wild card, maybe an easier way than finishing top 3 of their division. It's so tight. You play against the Leafs, the Panthers, the Bruins really often. Then I'm like, it's going to be difficult. I don't think, honestly, I think the 8 teams that are in the playoffs in the East right now so that's Toronto, Florida, Boston, Carolina, New Jersey, Washington, New York, and Tampa Bay. I think they'll be there. But if I had to choose only one, I think it would be Buffalo, because I think Buffalo can get better before the end of the season. I don't think Philadelphia will get better, and I don't think Detroit will get better. 2 of those coaches are in the highest odds of getting fired this year. So I'm like, maybe only Buffalo can actually get a little bit better.
Yeah, I have the same feeling too.
You know what's interesting, Kev, regarding what you said, is that in the East, I can see Buffalo, I can see maybe Detroit, and maybe, even if they're right now really far behind, maybe the Islanders make a push. With that being said, my struggle was, I'm looking at the 8 teams currently in, and I don't see any of them falter enough to get out. Whereas in the West, it's a bit of the opposite. I can see the Flames get tamed. I can see the Kings lose their crown. I can see the Canucks not quite figuring it out, because it feels like right now Elias Peterson is back, but then, it feels like there's always something with the Canucks this season so far. But I don't see really anybody other than the Oilers, the Blues.
Well, exactly. The Oilers and the Blues are my 2 teams.
And just like you, I had a soft spot for the HC, but they're already pretty far behind. So it's kind of the opposite. In the West, I can see team falter. I'm not sure if there are enough that I can see get lifted up. And in the East, I can see up to 3 teams go on pushes, make the right acquisition that would help them, but I don't see who they pass. So I think only 3 teams will get in. The Edmonton Oilers, and they're all in the West. No, you know what? 2 teams. The Edmonton Oilers will get in. The Blues will get in.
Those are my 2. And the Blues, they just acted, right? That's why Montgomery is the coach now, is because it's now or never. And you get a chance to get better. Edmonton, we all know that with the firepower they have, there's a high likelihood they're going to get there, which they might not, though. And sometimes I'm known as a betting man, the odds you get for Edmonton to not make the playoff as of today are probably very good. And percentages-wise, it's actually higher than you think that they're not in the playoffs. So it's interesting.
Yeah.
And to add to what you're saying, boys, is what's interesting is when we're looking at this in the East, you have the same team who have mostly been consistent to be in the playoffs in the past 2 or 3 years, and that have the experience to being consistent till the playoffs. And if we're looking at the Western Conference, and we're looking at the team that are maybe about to be off the playoffs scenario, which is the Flames and the Kings, and we're talking about the Oilers and the Blues. Like Oilers have plenty of experience of doing, like taking their spot and just like be in the playoffs position. So it's interesting, like which like the experience, but also like the consistency, the character can play and will play, I feel, in this scenario until April.
I completely agree with you. I completely agree with you. And so I do think it's one of those years where less teams that are currently in the playoffs get out. That I realized while we were talking that I completely kept on talking. So you may keep going with the next subject. I completely apologize for this. I was too excited about that subject.
You know what? No offense at all. I was like, he's taking the lead, and I was, you're the birthday boy, so you're leaning this. But
You know that legendary Alex Kovalev shift back when he was, I think it was back when he was in New York and Mike Keane was his coach. He wasn't getting off the ice. So what Keane did, stay on the ice, young boy, stay on the ice. And the freaking Kovalev, I think he scored a goal. He definitely got a point, but I think he scored a goal. Like you're trying to send a message, and the guy on the 7-minute shift actually scored a goal.
This dude.
I miss Alex Kovalev. What a beauty.
You're like, I was trying to prove a point here, and yeah, you still had, the last words. Whatever. Okay, Max. We're looking at what can we do with the Montreal Canadiens, and maybe a solution will be to acquire the defenseman who's really popular, David Jiricek. For the information was delivered by Chris Johnston. He reported that the Montreal Canadiens were maybe among the potential teams that were in the derby to acquire him. We know that, he has experienced a stormy relationship with the Columbus Blue Jackets, and now it feels like they're getting closer and closer to get a conclusion in this. And so if we're looking at the names of the teams that are interested in acquire him, Minnesota, Nashville, Pittsburgh, Vancouver, Philadelphia, and of course Montreal. Do you feel that Montreal could be able to nab this high potential defenseman, which is, a right side defenseman, which we are dreaming of in Montreal?
Right shot D, big bodied. He's 6'4"? Yeah, he's 6'4", and he's only a 2022 draftee. So that's Juraj Slafkovsky draft year. Like there's still a lot of time to turn around. He has proven in the AHL that he is a very good player, almost already too good for the AHL. In 2022-2023, as a European who could play in the AHL at that moment, he had 38 points in 55 games. He can't establish himself in the NHL. Of course, there was a change in front office in Columbus. Sometimes changes in the front office leads to this type of situation. And it's like this in every work line, right? Like a new boss comes in and he wants his people. He wants to, like, the people he can trust. It's okay.
Yeah,
with that being said, guys,
with the like some unenviable situations, maybe like being cut from the roster for
maybe he's just not your type, whatever.
Yeah.
With that being said, I'm curious to hear you guys on this, because am I the only one from a Montreal Canadian only perspective, not any other team interested, but from a Montreal Canadian perspective, you went at it with that type of trade with Kirby Dach. You went at it with that type of trade with Alex Newhook. So far, I'm insisting on these two words, so far. We're talking young players that can still turn things around, but so far, not with concluding results. Alex Newhook, to me, is clearly a very good third-line player. I don't see him being that much more than that. I still believe in Kirby Dach, but you've paid big prices to accelerate the rebuild for players that have turned out not to be accelerators of rebuild. Are you making the same mistake if you're going after David Jiricek?
Here's my thought on it. So, according to Chris Johnston's information, the Columbus Blue Jackets are, they're considering a pick and a prospect package. The pick would be high. Like, I feel first round pick or something around it, and a prospect. And I'm like, interesting. Is Joshua Roy maybe a prospect that we are willing to give up?
Yeah, we've heard the name. I'm not sure I like the idea of it.
Why?
I don't know. I really like Joshua Roy. I really like him. I'm not going to hide that whatever your beliefs are on this, local potential very good player in Montreal is something that I personally really like to have around. Now, of course, this is not the only thing that you have to keep in mind. I'm not dumb. Like, if Connor McDavid is available, you put everything on the line for him, including your mom and your dad. Like, it's okay. You put everything on the line. We're not talking about Connor McDavid here.
Sorry,
no,
Mom. Sorry, Dad.
and maybe it's a big price to pay for a guy that hasn't proved that he can, be a regular in the NHL.
Exactly.
Well, that brings me to one thing I want to add with this conversation. If they're willing to trade somebody from 2022-23 season, the draft, maybe they know something we don't. And they talk about Dak, they talk about Newhook. Teams that are willing to trade these type of prospects is because they have projected also things in the future that we don't know. And that comes to body type, that comes to their growth curve physically and also on the game, their hockey IQ, and their advanced way of what I call filling graphs, where there are a ton of questions they ask to prospects, right? They know basically what color they like, what they like to eat, how they train. And it's that, the way they train, they extrapolate over years. If we surround him better, is he going to... So when they extrapolate and they say that the answer is no, they want to trade them while they still have value, and that hasn't happened. And when you have those type of players that are being traded, usually it tells me that they don't think he's actually worth what they paid for or where they draft him, and trying to really get the most as they can right now.
Monetize it.
Yeah, monetize it was the word I was looking for, yeah.
Yeah, and he's an offensive defenseman. He's a guy who was a big shot, who can do a lot of... I mean, like I said, he came up and put a lot of points on the board in the AHL right from the gate. But despite being a big defenseman, he's not a defensive defenseman. Basically,
which we
need. You're going to get maybe a better version of Logan Mailloux. Do you need that?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like, if we're hoping that Logan Mailloux is going to make the team next year, you need to have maybe more defensive defensemen. What are you willing to give up, Max, to get him?
Not a lot. That's the thing. Not a lot.
Yeah.
I have cold feet. I'm not going to lie. I have cold feet. And I was born in the North. I have cold feet.
And the problem now is that Kirby Dak doesn't have a good value on the market as of right now. Newhook doesn't have a good... So we don't have, good money, like good value of exchange player right now without willing to be giving up on a Joshua Roy. This is the reality as of right now.
Here's the thing I have learned from Kent Hughes in his short time as a GM. He is a mathematical and a kind of, I would like to say, business-oriented GM. What I mean by this is I think he sees his players as assets. I think he sees his players as assets like a man will see, like a man or a woman, someone who works in stock market sees stocks. He likes to buy low. He likes to sell high. I don't think this is the case here.
I feel like, as Kev said, maybe they're trying to monetize him and pass, do a little sneaky pass here, and we'll need to look carefully into this. But Minnesota, as the information of Chris Johnston, is the front runner in that derby. Max, before swinging to the not even sorry segment, I wanted to talk about Toronto, who dropped the ball against Florida. We were excited for this matchup, and I feel that this is kind of a game where the injuries of the Leafs finally take their toll. I don't know what's your thought on it, but it wasn't the statement that we were looking for the Leafs.
Kevin, Daph, I need you guys to be there for me right now. And I need you guys to be there for me in the future. Present Max is asking a favor for future Max. Anywhere between here and the third round of the NHL playoffs, if you hear me say anything at all that makes you think that I'm starting to believe in the Leaf, hold me back. Protect me from myself. Put a helmet on my head. Give me a slap in the face and firmly say no. You say no to me. I will not let myself get into it again. The Toronto Maple Leaf had an opportunity. I know there is no Austin Matthews. They've been killing it without Austin Matthews. They're headed into Florida, in Sunrise, Florida, a few kilometers west of beautiful Fort Lauderdale, the beaches and all that. And you know what they did? They went to elbow room before the game, or I don't know what, because they had the Panthers at their mercy. The Panthers were in a rare, tough stretch from the past 2 seasons. They should have gotten in there and sent a message to the NHL. The Toronto Maple Leafs are the team to beat in the Atlantic Division this year. They did not do it. The Florida Panthers are still the team to beat. And I will not believe in the Toronto Maple Leafs until they are in the Eastern Conference Final. I am done. I'm done.
We had good intentions on this one. We were all pumped up and we're like, oh, look at those Leafs. They've been doing good. Consider all the injuries, and we're like, oh, this maybe would be a proof of character that will be built on until the playoffs. And we've got all been played. Yeah. We've been played.
And Bobby
once
McMahon,
again.
And now Bobby McMahon is game time decision for his next game too, which he got injured. So when we're looking at Toronto, yes, it's a lot of players. It's when Ryan Reeves will be back, and depending of if McMahon will be available, is 7 of their top 12 forwards that are out. So that's a lot. But John Tavares is now back in the first line with Mitch Marner. William Nylander still doing good, but Alex Nylander, who, by the way, is a journeyman who never really got a foothold in the NHL, has been touted as, oh, look at this great acquisition. He's now with the Maple Leafs. So, yeah, this is more the Toronto Marlies with 3 good forwards.
Superstars.
Yeah, this is the Marlies with Tavares, Marner, and Nylander.
Beautiful.
Guys, so we've taken a long time for this, but we will end up with our Friday segment that we installed with the Not Even Sorry, and I'm wondering if you're in an uplifting mood or throwing under the bus.
And this is the moment we will find out who's the Grinch today. Who will be will there be more than one Grinch? Are we all in the Grinch situation? And you know what? Since this is my first time making a statement, and it was my birthday yesterday, I am allowing myself the first statement. Does anybody have an objection?
No,
go for it, birthday boy.
Like at the wedding, like stand up now or lose me forever. Okay. Trevor Zegras is back. Baby, we are now seeing the one and only Trevor Zegras, the NHL cover boy. Trevor Zegras on a streak, 4 consecutive game with a point, 2 points game in those. In his last 6 game, this is over a point per game performance for Trevor Zegras. And at the right time, he is back. And you know what? He will shut the haters up, and he will get more than 65 points this season. He will have his best season on a personal level in terms of production. Will he end up in Anaheim, though? I do not know, because maybe if he is back at full strength, maybe now teams will want to make his acquisition. He has been a name that has come up in trade rumors on numerous occasions in the past few seasons. But my boy, the Slytherin himself, he is back.
Do you live in the world of unicorns?
I'm sorry?
2 weeks of Trevor Zegras, and you're like, suddenly he's back on track, baby.
Oh, yes, he is. He has the talent. He has everything he needs.
And I feel like he's going to perform, and maybe he's going to go over 65 points if he's not with the Anaheim Ducks.
Oh.
Yeah,
Oh,
that is
okay.
for me the case here.
Okay.
If we're looking at what so like the last time he got 65 points, it was 2022, 2023. So I'm like, okay, he can get back there again, but not with his current team. I don't buy that. I don't buy
hear you.
more than 65 points for him with his current team. I don't know, Kev. You feel like Max is living in a world of unicorn?
Well, I think he is, but it doesn't mean he's wrong. I think both can be right. I also think that it has something to do with his hair. Maybe he's like Samson, where now that the mullet has grown back, he feels like he can score more. So I think there's something
He's himself again.
Yeah, exactly. He's like, oh, the party in the back is back. All right, I can score again.
But
Daph, are you in an uplifting mood, or are you throwing somebody under the bus?
Oh no, I'm in an uplifting mood, Max, and I'm cheering for my boy Connor Bedard here. And
Really?
I feel that he doesn't get much love for the Fourth Nations face-off coming up. We're at a week where the full rosters of the Fourth Nations face-off is going to be chosen, and Bedard, for many out there, is on the bubble. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, I feel that for me, it's a no-brainer that he's there. And I know like people arguing. I feel like I understand where are they arguing on this one. But for me, I feel that he should be on the Canadian team. For people who has been saying that he has taken a step back from his impressive rookie season, I am replying to you that Chicago has already struggled to score as a group. And he had many different line mates already. So poor little guy, give him a break. He's 19 years old. And I feel like at 19 years old, you're looking at him, his skills are undeniable, and I feel like if you're looking at Team Canada, what can he do when he will be paired with some of the brightest stars, and especially on the power play? I feel like he could be a really good element, a really good piece for this team. I know he's young, but I feel that it could be really good for him to play with the best of the best and all the elite talent. It would be extremely valuable for him, and it would be extremely valuable for Canada that if we put him as a really young age, we're preparing him for the Olympics. And so I'm like, yeah, we need to put Bedard on that roster. I'm cheering for my boy.
If it was an Olympic year, I would disagree with you. This is a meaningless exhibition tournament organized by the NHL. The revenue will go to the NHL. Why not bring the brightest stars? Why not bring poster boys? Why not bring a kid who will attract more kids? And also, if you're Team Canada on an exhibition tournament, I insist, why not do a kids line of Wyatt Johnson, Alexis Lafrenière, and Connor Bedard? So if we were on Dragon's Den and you would just pitch to me your business, I would buy. I'm in. Why not? I'm in.
Yeah,
I am in.
I think Mac's explanation also has convinced me that, yeah, you're right. It's not like it's the Olympics. Like the goal is not necessarily to win this thing, is to showcase beautiful hockey. So maybe he's in then.
And it could be a confidence booster for him. So why not? And as you said, Max, he's going to bring people in. Like, he would be a ticket seller. I feel it.
All right, Daph and I were the human version of Cindy Lou Wu, because I don't think that technically they're humans. Will Kevin Laramie come in and be the Grinch, or is he also singing in the spirit of the holidays? Kevin, are you throwing under the bus, or are you uplifting?
I'm a mean one, Mr. Grinch.
Oh no!
Yeah.
Yes.
I was trying to do this.
You really are real.
I was trying to do the smile from Tim Curry in Home Alone 2, where he's looking at the card cancel. He's like,
Beautiful.
This has been a rant brewing inside of me for a couple weeks.
Oh.
It's the white jerseys made by Fanatics. Every time I see close-up shots on TV of those jerseys, I'm like, does nobody else notice they're transparent? I can see everything inside. I see like which brand of pads people are wearing. I see the black of the pads underneath the red. It doesn't look good. The same problem happened for Fanatic in baseball. You could see all the players' underwear for like the entire season last year. And I think it's the same thing right now in the NHL, but nobody's talking about it. The white jerseys of Fanatics, so all the away jerseys, the white ones, most of them are transparent. Pay attention. Look at it next time. That's all I can see now. I look at all the games on TV, and when I work, I'm really close to monitors and everything. It's all I see now. I'm like distracted from the play because I see the guys has like a 25-year-old Yofa like shoulder pads. I'm like, come on. I'm not supposed to see this. And yeah, it's been distracting me, and I think they got it quite easy so far, Fanatics, but people that I know who bought jerseys that are already, the seams are ripping apart. Already we saw with practice jerseys, like they wear it once or twice and then they have to throw them away. Fanatics has lived up to their reputation so far this year.
Number one, I want to say I wanted to hate Fanatics because I'm not a big fan of the brand. But the thing is, it was already like this. Kind of, because it's the same
fabric.
It's made in the same factory in Quebec, south of Montreal. It's quite almost literally the same jersey without the shoulders are a bit different. And I wanted to agree with you, Kev. I wanted to hate him, but I have not seen that. And you're talking about the transparency of them, maybe because I'm a huge goalie nerd. And I already, on the Adidas jersey, you could see the chest brand too. So I'm going to try and look at it in a different eye. But I have not noticed, honestly, a difference so far, personally.
Well, after a season of working on baseball, which was like so obvious, like you can see the pockets, so I'm like, maybe that's carried over to hockey, and I'm looking for it now. Because I'm like, well, I've seen it in baseball, and now I'm just hyper-focusing on it, and I'm like, see, I was right, confirmation bias. I see what I thought I was going to see, and now I know. Maybe, but so far I'm like, the white ones. And I agree with you, the side, but it's not just a side. It's literally like underneath the logo, like the Detroit Red Wings and other I've seen. So maybe exaggerating, but so far I'm not. I think they should put a bit more like thickness on the white jerseys, just to make sure, you know.
And they had the opportunity to do so or to do better than the Adidas. But me too, Kev, I'm with you on this one. And maybe I didn't, take a good look at it when there were Adidas jersey. And maybe I was more, I had a closer look on these ones because, people were making some bad comments about it. But I'm with you on this one. I told my boyfriend, like, is this my practicing Canadian Tire $5 jersey? I'm like, what is this? It feels like it. And I'm like, I haven't touched one, like feel one in my hand. But I'm like, it feels like it's the same fabric. And maybe this is where Fanatics lost an opportunity to do better than the Adidas jersey. But Kev, I'm with you on this one. I was at La Cage and it was on the biggest of screens. And I was just like, this is terrible. I'm with you on this one. And the baseball, it was...
Yeah, baseball was like,
Baseball was horrible.
Oh, yeah.
Baseball was completely horrible.
Like, if players were wearing, like, funky MeUndies type of underwear with, like, prints on it, you're like, okay. He has ducks on his underwear. Like, I can see the rubber ducky. Like, exactly.
I'm looking at close-ups right now of the jerseys of the white Montreal Canadiens jerseys. I'm on their Instagram page. I'm gonna look into this and come back to you and see if you have changed my mind. Just before we end today's episode, just a quick roundup in our DMs. I am absolutely not surprised to see that last week, Not Even Sorry statement made some noise, especially Mr. Kevin Larame's take on the Montreal Canadiens being late. We had a lot of comments, but one of them struck a nerve with me, caught my attention. It's from Rob Bastien on YouTube. And I guess he was completely agreeing with Kevin because here's what he had to say. Nobody wants to say it. I will. Fire Martin St. Louis. I did not expect this coming. And I have a confession to make to you guys. I do not agree with Rob Bastien. I don't think we're there yet at all. I will say this, though. And I came to this conclusion this week because I was having a heated argument in the group chat with one of my boys. And we were talking, and he was talking about Nick Suzuki this, Nick Suzuki that. And I was like, why on earth are we focusing on the best scorer on the team? Why on earth are we focusing on the one guy not disappointing that much? He's the least of my worries. And then I went on my list of worries, and I was like, you know what? Without wanting to fire him, Martin St. Louis actually is number one on my list of worries in Montreal.
Why? What are
I am not sure if he has improved enough as a head coach to be the head coach that will take this bunch of young players and get them to a higher level. I am not one who believe that the rebuild is late. I am not one who believe if that's what ends up happening at the end of the season, that if the Montreal Canadiens ends up, 30th in the league, that it's a bad thing, because teams can go from seemingly being at the darkest point of the night in the rebuild to the playoff. The Colorado Avalanche did it from 48 points to never missing the playoff again yet. Mario Lemieux, I know it's an whole other era, no salary cap and all that, but missed the playoffs 5 of his 6 first season and then won 2 cup out of nowhere. Made pow after making the playoffs once. So it can happen. I'm not sure yet if he will be the man to conduct that. I'm not sure if he has improved enough as a head coach for that.
Who was the coach of Mario Lemieux? Oh, hello, Scotty. Beam me up, Scotty Bowman. I think you got your answer there.
But, okay, maybe he's not at the point where we wanted him to be. And I feel I've said it at the beginning of the season. For me, he's the one who having pressure on his shoulder because he's part of the improvement that we want to see, especially this year around. But I don't feel that changing the coach right now, it's the solution, especially with such a fragile team who has lost all of their confidence. Marty, for me, he's the one. We've already said it, but he's a player's coach, and maybe the solution is getting the right people around him. We've been talking about this, but yeah, I don't feel that firing St. Louis is the solution, especially not right now. But I'm afraid that he'll get the blame unfairly. I don't like his position right now. I feel like he's really on a hot seat, but not because he needs to be fired. It's just because we need to do something. People will want to see something change. And if we cannot do a transaction that would be proper or that we feel that is in the direction that we want to take as the process of this rebuild, I feel that they will unfairly need to get some things done, and he could be the one who get the blame.
Interesting. With the contract extension, though, he's here for the whole season. I would bet on that. It would take a terrible, long losing streak, I think, to get the coach out of that contract.
Is approaching.
Are you saying it's a date to watch?
And no, but we've the Montreal Canadiens have had
Oh,
some difficulties around Christmas, and the
I get it.
slump
My bad.
already, like fairly happens there
I get it.
every year for the past 2 or 3 seasons. So
Just this
I get
weekend
it.
too. It's a tough weekend, right? 2 games in the
Oh,
afternoon with
yeah.
Boston, and so yeah. So, yeah,
Oh,
I
yeah.
think, yeah, you're right. You guys are right.
It will be a tough weekend, Boston and New York for the Montreal Canadiens. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. Make sure to leave a like, a comment if you may on any subject you've heard in this podcast. We love interacting with you in the comment. Subscribe to Game Over Networks. Catch Hyperdrive Hockey on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts. Subscribe to the pod. Leave a like. Leave a review. It helps us. My name is Max Venot alongside Daphne Malbeuf and Kevin Laramie. We thank you for joining in. Have a very safe and good weekend, and talk to you on the next episode of Hyperdrive Hockey.